What if I told you that society has everything wrong, essentially everything wrong? And you would say to me, probably, I'm not trying to assume what you're saying right now, but you're probably thinking, of course, Braden, we know society's fucked. You've been there, you've told us this already. But not only is it all wrong, it's wrong according to the sciences, according to what we know about the universe. And that is that there is actually no free will. And that's the topic of today's discussion. Probably gleaned that from the title, but yeah, that's me laying it out. I don't think that we have free will, and this is why. But first things first, for you new to this argument and discussion, let's define free will. Free will, according to Stanford's Encyclopedia of Philosophy, thanks for that, cheers lads, is defined as a significant kind of control over one's actions. And thus what I'm saying here, and here it comes, here's the bombshell. I don't think that we have any sort of control over how our lives turn out, for the better or for the worse. I think it's all determined. Determined, that's going to be the title of the book we're going to look into in a little bit. And you might be at the point of the video where you're like, whoa, Braden, you need to take your meds. And that's when I tell you, joke's on you, I never ever took them in the first place. So if I took them now, it'd be different, you know? Then I'd really probably be off my rocker. So I used a little term there, determinism, for purposes of explaining what I am. Essentially, a determinist would believe that the actions preceding this, as well as the actions right now, are interacting in ways akin to a train on a railway track. So it's going pretty linear. It doesn't really have the option to swerve left or right. You're on the tracks, you're continuing along. With every subsequent event, you're staying on that same track. And that's pretty much verifiable by science that is a fact. But my denomination of determinism is incompatible determinist, which means I don't believe that anywhere along these railroad tracks there's any bumps in the road where, oh my God, there's free will. There it is. Found it. Got you. I don't believe that to be true. I don't believe that there is any inch of free will to be found anywhere in the universe. And then the compatible determinist, in my opinion, do some mental gymnastics to get over the fact that all the science seems to point to the fact there's no free will, but they just can't accept it and think this is a horrible, terrible conclusion. So thus, they do a backflip over that issue, and what do you know? They find a pot of gold, and in the pot of gold, oh my God, there's free will. So just to give a quick example, make sure everybody's on the same page here, what I am saying is, let's imagine you have a cookie setting right in front of you, and it's your favorite cookie. You love this cookie. Oh my God, you only get it like 3 times a year or whatever, when someone just so happens to have your favorite cookie at a function, because you just don't go out and buy cookies because you know it's your weakness. Okay, this is actually a scenario about me, and it is my personal weakness. The cookie. They call me the Cookie Monster. So you have this in front of you, and what I'm saying is, in your mind, you're probably thinking, oh, should I eat this cookie? I really shouldn't eat this cookie. This is like my 5th cookie of the night already. I'll be a lot better off if I don't eat this cookie. My blood sugar's high, or I just know that it's not part of my diet. I'm saying you probably don't really even have the choice. No, probably. You don't have the choice. It's already determined if you're going to eat that cookie or not. That's what I'm saying. Super rudimentary example, but it scales all the way up and all the way down with every decision in life. To steal an analogy from the man who actually converted me to such ideas, such as a lack of free will, I'm gonna opt with, it's turtles all the way up and all the way down. Shout out to Mr. Sapolsky. Which, speaking of him, that brings me to what really incited me to make this video and really pushed me over the edge of the whole free will bandwagon, or the lack thereof, rather. And that would be determined by Robert Sapolsky. You may or may not have seen of Sapolsky's YouTube lectures over at Stanford University, but this book right here, to me, is possibly the most important piece of any sort of media of our time. And I'm not putting that lightly. I'm really not. I mean it with full brevity and full confidence that I'm endorsing this to such an extent. And oftentimes, recency bias or whatever, full disclosure, I jump on bandwagons. I'm like, oh my God, that movie was amazing, greatest thing I've ever seen. Or, oh my God, this thing I just experienced, awesome, nothing can live up to it. And then something lives up to it very shortly after. And I'm like, well, I think I maybe blew this a little bit out of proportion. I don't see how I can with this, because really fundamentally this has changed the way that I see everything. And let's dive into what I mean by that, and how, a 400-page book can have such a profound impact on someone's life. It's not like it's the Bible and it has 3,000 pages or whatever it is. This is very well as far as basing my morals and how I navigate the world around, this is my Bible. So yeah, this is big idea stuff. We're not small fry right now. It's a big fry. It's a fish fry and there's like 500 people there. That's the scale we're talking on. This has ramifications, in my opinion, for society and civilization and its entire trajectory and where it goes from here. All riding on who sees this book, who understands it, who interprets it correctly, and what they do with that information. I think this book really has that power to do that. I truly do, and I don't think that, I have no other agendas in saying this, and this is all personal opinion, but wow, really, really mind-blowing stuff. And thus far, if you're like, Braden, you're an idiot, of course there's free will, I'm laying down the gauntlet. I'm saying, if you believe there's free will, which you probably do, but maybe you're open to there not being a free will, or otherwise, why would you be here? Please, please, please read this book. Read this book, read this book, read this book. Because there's no more. This is the magnum opus, I think, of all the literature on it, especially for the case of a lack of free will. I will personally give you my copy if you know me and happen to hit me up on social media or through my messenger, which is what I prefer because I don't actually use social media a lot of the time. But please read that book and let me know what you think, and follow these ideas through, and just keep an open mind with it, because I know it's easy to kind of switch off in your brain and be like, oh, this is all bull crap or whatever, But try not and do that. I know this is going against every knee-jerk reaction you have of course we have free will. This is ludicrous and all this and all that. I get it, because I was almost the same way. I was maybe more slanted into the possibility that, yeah, this is all determined. But going into this book, going into a lot of this, I was still very much on the fence either way. But this pushed me so far over to the right. Not political terms at all. No, this is not a right-wing book by any dimension. I just mean, for the sake of the example, I went way over the fence. It was like I was teetering and then I got flung. That's what it did for me. And it's going to delve into some really fascinating stuff. Some of it's pretty dense, I won't lie. But you're going to learn, about complex emergence, chaos theory, even a dabble of quantum mechanics. You're going to learn about how the human mind works, the human brain, probably synonymous, those two terms. You're going to learn about how conditioned responses dictate so much of our behavior, and how this all correlates with not only us, but everything around us, the environment around us. It's really, really fascinating stuff. Even if you don't walk away from it with a new point of view, you will learn something. You will learn a lot if you really digest this. And this whole video isn't meant to just be me glazing over Mr. Sapolsky or anything by any means, but I figured that if we're going to discuss this, we have to mention this book. So yeah, I see this in a lot of ways as the holy grail of the topic of determinism, the topic of free will, no free will. I don't see how anything else could be more comprehensive, and I don't see how a man could be more primed throughout his life to be able to address these big picture conversations and discussions about free will or no free will. Robert Sapolsky is a neurobiologist, firstly. He's a studier of bamboos for several years. He has an awesome book on that too that I haven't read yet, but I've heard great things on. He is very in with sociologists and psychologists and have worked very close with them respectfully. And he also on the side is just like, yeah, I'm going to volunteer as a public defender assistant to explain how certain brain structures can affect decision making and that of the like. And then of course he's well established and connected with all the academics, and thus if he doesn't understand anything, he can always just refer to one of his friends and pals to help explain it to him. And then he's leveled up in that way, and he's already clearly super competent in all these different fields already without having to dial up a friend. If I had to give a synopsis for what this book entails, essentially you're looking at first 200 pages are going to be explaining why there is no free will, why there can't be free will, and then the last 200 are looking at what do we do about it? What's to be done now that we've killed the idea of the free will? How do we advance as a society? How do we move on? There's an afterword as well in the paperback that wasn't originally in the hardback. Sapolsky makes it his aim to bring the question of free will out of the philosophical depths it's been submerged in for oh so long, analyze it with the scientific eye, and then he plunges it back into the philosophical depths to try and hammer home how we can, as a society, as an individual, move forward with our newfound knowledge that everything we've ever essentially been taught is incorrect, and we have no decision on what happens, what occurs in our lives. And I'm super glad and thankful that he did include that last half, because the first 200 pages, they can really be a downer at times, because you're just sitting there like, well, wow, because you're just like constantly getting shown why everything that you thought was true is false. The latter half of the book is kind of helping you through that process and showing you it doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. It doesn't have to be this terrible and horrible thing that we've uncovered. It's just the truth. It's not good. It's not bad. It's the truth. Morality is no longer a function anyways once you get out of the depths of the free will and realize it's all made up, man. It's all made up. Nothing's good, nothing's bad. Jeez. So I will not even attempt to hit on even a half of the points presented in the literature. Like I said, it's 400 pages. Granted, only 200 are really him explaining why he's come to these conclusions and why there could be no free will. But what his argument boils down to in its most condensed and refined form is to the effect of the things that happen a second, a minute, an hour, a day, a month, a year, a decade, a century, a millennia, whatever happens after a millennia ago is responsible for what we do in this present moment. Society, climate, past experiences, community, hormones, diets, economic status, family history, civilization history, genealogy, and probably a whole host of other factors that I can't conjure up in my pretty little mind right at this moment have all accumulated into the sum of you, the person that would end up watching this video on free will at this time of day and all that jazz. Pretty trippy, I know. But he lays this all out, and then he subsequently proves why everything he's laying out is empirically validated in a beautiful and engaging, super impressive fashion. It's a real good horror show type deal. I know for a lot of people, they kind of avoid a lot of scientific literature because they fear that these guys are going to be using incomprehensible terms way over their head, talking to a very very small majority of people that can actually comprehend what in the hell they're saying. But Sapolsky does a great trick in that he is able to fully present ideas, but bring in analogies, bring in real world examples that allow you to better understand these sometimes admittedly difficult concepts to grasp. I struggled with a couple of chapters as well, but if you really apply yourself and really stick with it, I think that you will be able to get what is relevant from each and every chapter. Like I said, he does go into a little bit of a nitty-gritty, especially when he gets into the neurobiology, but we have to excuse him in this point. It is his specialty. So beyond that, like I said, it's still very entertaining and very comprehensible. It just takes a little bit of that brain power, but for something like this, it all pays off in the end. So my good brothers and sisters, please, please, please pick up this book and go to other places on the topic too, look at videos, watch other books, either in support of free will or against it. But give some time, like I said earlier, give some time to this project, to this thought, to this conversation. I truly, truly think this, and I can't understate this enough, this is an important topic for us to breach, for us to think about, for us to form our own opinions on. And I think it would be a real shame, a real horror show shame, if we push this to the back, push this to the side, we don't have time or what have you. If you don't have time for something on the magnitude of, do we have control of what we're doing in life? What do you really have time for? What could possibly stagger up to this? And I'm being a bit patronizing, and I apologize, but I have a burning passion for these type of big idea conversations, like the arguments of theology or no theology, free will, no free will. I think those are on the same playing field, and thus I think that this is a paramount discussion we're having, and something that shouldn't be taken lightly or skimmed over in any way. I think you need to delegate quite a bit of time to all of this to really wrap your head around it and come out with your own formed opinion. But I think that if you do come out the other side believing that there's no free will, I think that that is going to be hugely beneficial for you in your personal life and how you come to see the world, as it has for me. So now that I've kind of touched on the fact that I don't believe in free will and my inspiration, my catalyst for really writing and recording this video, I wanted to delve into, okay, some of the problems that we're then faced with if we do go down this rabbit hole, which I think we should. So the big problem that we reach as far as implications for society as a large, the big one is going to be, well, if we are on this track, so to speak, and we don't have a say on what really goes on, how can we be held responsible for any of our decisions or life trajectories or any of that lot? And that's when you realize you can't. There's no possible way that you can believe in incompatible determinism and also hold anyone accountable for any of their actions. Boom. And that line of thinking, let me say, gentlemen and ladies, is a extremely hard line of thought to follow, especially in the society we currently live in, where everything is based around the fact that, no, of course we have free will and all this and all that. Even Sapolsky mentions in the book that he struggles a lot of the time to live out this philosophy that he is proclaiming and professing, and probably spent months and months, if not years, probably years formulating and coming to understand, years of his life, and he can still hardly manage to really live that on the daily basis. But I think that, again, has a lot to do with how society is structured, where, be it media, daily interactions, long-held conceptions, the justice system, all of them are screaming at you, free will, free will, free will exists. So it must be very hard to break free of that, and that's what I'm finding. Though I will say I've had some measure and some score of success on coming to realize free will. Okay, free will's not real. Then how can I implement that into my life and improve my life on a basis of that? And I think I have had some successes, which we'll get into in a little bit later. But it's hard when everything is constantly reinforcing you that no, you do have free will. Of course, you have free will. It might come out to be the biggest inhibitor of people actually switching over to the side of the anti-free willers, if you will. I don't like saying anti because it implies negative connotations when it's really not negative. It's quite a positive. If you are on the side of there being no free will, let's put it like that, you're probably thinking though, surely society can't be wrong since essentially the beginning of written history, right? Surely this can't be so. And I, as a 20-year-old, very lacking in knowledge and comprehension guy, is proclaiming, yes, it's all wrong, it's all backwards, there is no free will. And you're probably thinking, who the hell is this guy? Like I said, I'm just a 20-year-old. I don't claim to know the answers to the universe. This is just what I think personally. But I think the fact that I can acknowledge that proves that it can in fact be done, and be done by rather unremarkable people in that manner. But if the consensus changes slowly over time and more people get warmed up to the idea that, yeah, maybe there's no free will, I think that the pendulum will swing and it'll be a lot easier in general for people to accept that fact and get on board with that and not have to live in a space almost not outside of society, but in a corner in society where you're very much living with this contradictory belief to what you're actually having to do and say and interact with. I hope this revolution happens because the way I see it now, people are living and dying on the basis of this idea, this false ideal that they covet so highly. And I think that's really sad. I really do. And then you might come to the conclusion, okay, well, what then? We believe that there's no free will. You've convinced us. We've dispelled the myth. What do we do now? What is it? Complete anarchy, a collapse of structure, the end of civilization as we know it? No. No, my friends. There's a better, safer, cooler way. At least I hope so. Obviously, like I said, I'm not clairvoyant. I don't know the future, but I don't believe, and this is partially backed up by empirical studies reflected in Sapolsky, I don't believe that a lack of believing in free will is implicit in someone just being an anarchist and saying fuck it to the free world. I don't do it. Sapolsky doesn't do it. A lot of people that agree with our line of thinking don't do it. And even real world examples of things happening have also, proved that this is just not the case. The lessening of free will is actually almost every time been a benefit to the generality of humanity. And what do I mean by the lessening of free will? Admitting that people with epilepsy aren't possessed by the devil, admitting, or witches or what have you, admitting that people can't really control their orientation when it comes to which gender they favor in a sexual manner, things like that. And that's allowed for people to be more accepting and understanding of others and their differences, and overall provided a far more accepting and compassionate world, which I think is great. I don't see how anyone could make an argument, a convincing argument, to any person that is, I don't want to say normal, but has all of their cognitive facilities working in a generally normalized way. And still came back to the word normal. I don't think anybody would agree with the fact that that compassion's a bad thing and we shouldn't aspire towards more compassion in every facet of life. I think that everybody is on the same board and believe that compassion is something that is paramount to the future of the world, of civilization if we're going to get through these dark and murky years that we seem to find ourselves in now. Now, if I was to get all hypothetical and say, if say there's a broadcast and it broadcasts everywhere, you can't really skip it or miss it, and immediately after that broadcast everyone's like, okay, I get it, there's no free will, I think in that scenario we would be set up immediately for a utopian society. But obviously that is a very much impossible thing to do. That's not how people change their minds, especially on subjects that are deeply, deeply, deeply integrated into their worldview and how they come to understand life in and of itself. Sometimes it's hard for you to change someone's mind on something super trivial. So I would imagine that something like this is akin to getting someone religious or non-religious to believe in a religion or not believe in a religion subjectively. It's not going to be an easy road, but I think it's going to be one of those hard but ultimately rewarding roads. Like most things in life, it's going to be worth the toil, worth the effort, because at the end of this, what I see happening, essentially, what the end product is, like I said, there would be more compassion, for sure, a whole lot more compassion, but along with that, there would be no room for a hate of yourself, of others, no more bigotry, obviously, no more war. And I can hear people saying now, oh, look at this hippy dippy. He's espouting how we can get rid of war and peace and love and kumbaya and all that. I'm not saying kumbaya. What I'm saying more is a kumbaya matata. That's more the jive we're going with now. If we want to use fun words, which I'm always very much a fan of, indeed. Love my Lion King, and I love my, I guess kumbaya is just a song. So I love both of those words, very good. Harpening back to like the self-hatred thing, I think that determinism, personally for me, has helped me immensely in accepting myself and my differences and some shortcomings that I perceived as character traits or defects in my life, which turn out to in fact just be part of my biological makeup and completely out of my control. So there's no reason for me to beat myself up and be the biggest hater to myself on it. And that's been it's a big weight off your shoulders when you realize, like, yeah, no, it's not really my fault in a lot of these cases. So that's a little bit of what I've experienced thus far with my journey into the deterministic, incompatibilist realm, but I'm sure there's many more benefits as well. So say everybody did get on board, or say we shifted in society to focusing on everyone getting on board. Obviously, that would have immense implications. Essentially, everything would need to be reworked from the ground up, and that includes your criminal justice systems, personal relationships, distribution of wealth, government, institutional policy, perception of people as people, just the whole 9 yards. Everything would need reworked, except, the more empirical facts, like green is green still. Green isn't going to change because there's no free will. But a lot of stuff would have to be reworked and rechanged and reconceptualized. But I believe we can do it because we've gone through these reforms before. Like I said, we've gone through changes in thought where we thought people were demons because they had seizures, or people with dyslexia had something wrong with them, or they're lazy, when really it's just the way that their brain kind of registers different letters. So we've done it before, and I think that, and this is me peering out with my little optimistic hat on, I think that we can do it again on a larger scale. And I think that doing that could very well lead us into a beautiful, brave new world. And on these reworkings of government policy and criminal justice systems and what have you, I have my formulations on these, but I'm still very much formulating them. And thus, I think I'll postpone addressing these different points and how we can go about upgrading the various systems we have right now or completely destroying them and conjuring up new ones for another video, because I think this really specifically deserves a lot of time and thought put behind it. And also, this is already going to be a pretty bloated video, and my retention is not very good as is. So I think coming out with like a 50-minute tell-all on free will and non-free willing and stuff like that is probably just too comprehensive and too dense for everyone to get the value out of it that I think that we can produce. So we'll kick that can down the road, so to speak, for now, and revisit that at another time. But now I wanted to kind of close out this video talking about my personal experience with determinism, how I reached that course of events. And I want to say, over the course of me using the term determinism, besides that initial defining little spot I did earlier, every time I've been using it subsequently, it's been to imply incompatible determinism. That's what I've been kind of shorthanding it to, and I hope that hasn't been super confusing, but I thought I'd clear that up now. So my journey into the incompatible determinist role, it probably starts quite a long time ago. Very, very long time ago. Also known as 2 years ago. Also known as probably the start of my life, when I thought long and hard about things like the Bible and religion in general, and came to the conclusion that specifically the Bible was a fairy tale that was taken a little bit too seriously. And by no means do I seek to insult anyone's religion or their worldview or anything like that. I don't get any pleasure out of that, and I very much respect you for your valued opinion on these different subjects. It's just how I felt, and I wanted to express that through this story. So, after the fall of religion for me, let's put it like that, I turned to philosophy in turn, because, well, it seemed like the logical next step. I didn't have any theology, but the close cousin philosophy seemed like it had something to offer me. And I followed it, and I fell in and out of love with different opposing worldviews through the course of my studies into the philosophical. And I really enjoy my time analyzing these different avenues and world beliefs and things of that nature through philosophy, and saw really at a time that there was no higher pursuit than the philosophical journey and the quest. And specifically, I enjoyed ethics and metaphysics, but really, as a whole, I very much still admire and find it vastly entertaining, that being philosophy. Because I essentially came to the conclusion that philosophy has shaped our everyday thoughts more than any other study, more than anything else in general that we could conceive of. And it certainly had its missteps along the way. Who hasn't? Talking about Plato, essentially. I was going to do like a cough, but that's kind of played out. I'm not a fan of Plato. I think that's probably where a lot of philosophy got muddled for some millennia or so, with his whole theory of forms and stuff and all this and all that. I enjoy Socrates, though I don't like his disciple. Socrates, I think, did a lot for philosophy by encouraging the curious, the curiosity in all of us that is to be found and to be honored and cultivated in a meaningful way. But anyways, I eventually arrived at the more existential realm of philosophy, which is more recent in time, not super recent, not the newest branches of philosophy. But I arrived at the existential path, I suppose, and eventually I chose it as my denomination. And furthermore, my denomination of existentialism was absurdism, which is essentially what my whole first video on this page is about, though it is in a very incomprehensible and random way, which I hope you all are enjoying, this much more structured approach that I'm taking here. And after spending some time with Derek Camus, I naturally started seeing things in a more objective way, which eventually led me into questioning free will. And let me back up here for a second and mention existentialism is essentially the idea that there is no objective, meaningful reason for existence. Thus, you're left to create your own and interpret the world how you see fit. It's a very freeing. And then absurdism, one layer above that, would be, well, if everything is essentially random and out of control and there's not any meaning, might as well find it quite humorous and quite joyful and have a good time while we're on this absurd spinning rock. And like I said, absurdism eventually led me to the question of free will and subjects like that. And that's not to say I've never broached the topic before. I read a horror show book, that being a very good book, called Sapiens. You may or may not have heard of it. It's very famous, especially for a more recent publication, and I've actually met quite a bit of people that have read it and thoroughly enjoyed it. So I read Sapiens, and then that was the first time it really got into the nitty-gritty of, do we even have free will or not? And at the time, I didn't really want to dive right in because I was kind of honestly scared by the notion of what I would find. And at that point in time, I don't think I held the truth so highly, and I probably justified myself a little bit by, well, it doesn't really matter. I'm enjoying existence, believing I do have free will. So we'll keep it that way. But since then, priorities have changed. I've gotten a lot more empirical, I suppose, and like I said, a bit detached from surface level pleasures and that whole lot. So, sitting there with my black coffee and carefree attitude, which I attribute to Camus, of course, I took up this challenge of free will and, rolled it over on its head. I wrestled with it for quite some time, watched some videos, deliberated further, observed it in my everyday life even, and was really leaning towards the absence of free will, honestly. That's before this book, but then I read this book and it essentially hammered in the proverbial nail in the wall and confirmed and validated all my suspicions to an extent I didn't think they could be validated. Bringing this all back to philosophy, nowadays I feel like we live in an age where certain scientists, of course, they almost play a twofold role in the story of life, in that they are specialists in their specific fields, but they're also philosophers, especially Sapolsky here, because not only can he create these hypotheses, he can prove them, and that's something unprecedented in any of the previous philosophies, because before it was essentially a bunch of dudes spouting out a whole lot of nonsense and claiming that they knew the secrets of the universe, when in reality it was probably like some weird dream or something, or a play they watched and interpreted in a wrong way that they came to that conclusion. But now we have theorizing, but also the follow through of those theories to see if they hold up or not in Sapolsky and others like him. And I think that's incredible and a huge leap forward for philosophy as a study and as a science. And I think that we've really reached this precipice of philosophy and where it can go in the future. Originally, how I was going to frame this in this video was, I feel like we're at the end of philosophy, but then I rolled it over a little bit more and realized we're not at the end of philosophy. We're at a bold new beginning for philosophy. And that bold beginning starts when we accept that there's no free will, and then we deliberate in our first steps in this new bold world how we can thus continue living and go on and cope with the fact that there's no free will. It's akin to what Friedrich Nietzsche said about 120, 30 years ago now, with the whole philosophy of the future stuff and the Übermensch and stuff. I think he was very ahead of his time, and he was really kind of hammering home this whole idea that we have to move past good and evil. We have to move past these traditional value systems and essentially conjure up our own, because it's all hearsay anyways, and it's all made up for a lack of better term. But this whole question, this first step in the new philosophy of how to cope with a reality such as this one, where nothing you say or do really deserves to be either acclaimed or disdained, because it's not really in your control anyways. How do we find meaning, and how do we continue on living in such a world? Well, my faithful droogs. How do I live in a world where everything is determined? A world where nothing I do is of my own volition. I think that this very ponderance will actually keep us busy for a very, very long amount of time, and everybody will reach their own conclusions, as is bound to happen. But of course, some people will pronounce theirs as the way. Whatever the way is, there is no way. Shout out to the Tao. So I wanted to present what I've gone through and how I've come to broach the subject and almost reconcile the lack of free will with continuing to live a meaningful existence. I struggled for a while. I had like a mourning period, as I've come to conceptualize it, as a mourning period of my free will. It's a sad thing, you know. I was almost so attached to this idea that when it left me, when I changed my mind on it, it was like grieving a lost one or something akin to that. It was a bit sad, and change is always hard, but change is a necessity for evolution. It truly is, and I believe that. But eventually I got past this whole grieving process. It was probably about a week and a half of me just every day, like, oh, why am I even getting out of bed? Oh, why am I doing this? All this different stuff, because I didn't see a point in it all. If, you know, it was determined I was going to either get out of bed or not, or things like that. Obviously, with my new knowledge, I had changed, which is something I haven't really touched on in this video super heavily. Change is an underlying factor of reality, and you might say, well, how can you believe in change and also believe that there's no free will? I don't think the two have to be interlocked or exclusive to each other. The presentation of new knowledge is an avenue for change. I don't think anybody could really deny that human beings are constantly changing. You're not on a biological or a psychological level really similar at all to, you know, a 1-year-old version of yourself. You don't have the same interests, you don't have the same skin structure, you don't have anything really in common with that. Change is an inherent part of life, yes, but it's not so much that we get to choose to change. Stuff is presented. I didn't choose to be a determinist, a incompatible determinist, but it's the conclusion I reached with all the knowledge and information presented to me. It's where I came out to be. But after that about week and a half of a big struggle, you know, I started to overcome things, and I started to put new connections together and see how this could serve, like I said, not to be a negative or a positive thing, but actually probably a positive thing objectively, but just seeing it as a truth, seeing it as a fact of reality, no different than the fact that a fly flies, something akin to that. So eventually I arrived at the conception that I now hold now of seeing myself as part of a wonderfully incredible, complex system. A cog, yes, but a beautiful and dynamic cog in a beyond comprehensible, impressive universe. I mean, it's almost soothing to know that you're a part of something so big and so grand. People say, well, there's no free will, there's no God. Then, you know, how do you get by and how do you feel any meaning? It's like I'm connected to everything, and I can acknowledge that connection now. And that gives me an immense amount of meaning. And along with that, there's some other things that give me meaning that arise from a lack of free will belief. For example, going back to the whole idea of knowledge encouraging change and being the catalyst for change, it's invigorated me to be more studious and pursue more subjects that will grow my brain and allow me to understand and conceptualize the world in ways I couldn't really before. And also it serves as almost an obligation for me personally to want to be more compassionate, be more caring for others, because I recognize that it would be external for you, but my external presence in someone's life, being nice, being kind to them, showing them love, showing them appreciation, is in turn going to make them echo it in some ways and take that to heart in others, and thus they may produce more kindness, more appreciation, more love. And it's a very much giving thing. It's a hopeful thing that we react off each other that inspires me to want to put off a good reaction. So when people take me in, they're coming away in a better spot than they left, or they're leaving in a better spot than they came in. Sorry, words. It's getting to the end of the video, and I've been recording for a long time. So yeah, basically, I find the ability to still change despite there being no free will inspiring. I find the fact that I am just this little thing. I was looking at an ant earlier today and I was like, we play no bigger role, each of us. We kind of have the same bid, and I perceive for so long that, oh, I'm so important, I'm way better than the ant. But really, there's not a lot of difference in the machinery and the way that we go about coming to decisions. The only difference I can really tell is we're more sophisticated in our mechanics, and we are aware of our mechanics. But other than that, an ant and a me, we're all part of the same unit. And that's the universe at large, and beyond that, the galaxy, and beyond that, whatever's beyond that. So I love that. And then I also love the fact that despite there not being any free will, we can still influence each other to be better agents, to show more kindness and more appreciation. And probably my favorite point is this whole point of what free will, the lack of free will, can do for a society as a whole, and that's negate any sort of judgment and hatred for someone that's different than you, because it essentially invalidates that, because we come to realize everything that we do behavior-wise is not in our control. It's a biological factor, and thus why would anyone hate anyone for any certain decision that they come to? It's just, I think that this is the one true way that we could eventually get to something akin to a utopia. And I know people are pretty tired and sick of these utopian and dystopian stories and analogies and theories, because it seems to oversimplify a lot of things in a not so simplified world. But I think this is the best bid for it. I really do. So yeah, thank you for your time as always. This is how I've reached my conclusion on a lack of free will and what I've done with that. Thank you again for your time as always. And since you stayed to the very end like a good conditioned boy or girl, I'll key you in on my next video, which you may have picked up on slightly with the droog and the horror show lingo, is my next video is going to be discussing A Clockwork Orange, probably the book by Anthony, I forget what his last name is. I'm so sorry, Anthony. We'll get you 3 times over in the next video. And also maybe cover on a side the movie. But I think that is a beautiful case of a dystopian civilization betrayal and how a lot of things can go wrong. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I want to say that. And it's synthetic glory of dystopia and Beethoven and all this madness and purple hair stuff. Can't wait to talk about that, so stay tuned. Read the book if you haven't. Both Sapolsky's Determined and also Clockwork Orange to get all primed up for our next video. Until next time, I've been your humble narrator. Good day.